Hello and welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm Dr. Wichterman. I want to ask you to like this video and subscribe. It would mean a lot, would show me that you care about this kind of content and that it's meaningful for you. If you watched part one, you already know the main point, at least of the problem. And that is for a lot of people, pornography is not just about desire. It's about relief, it's about escape, it's about changing what's happening inside as fast as possible. It's less about the pornography and more about the regulation strategy. So, in this video, I want to help you or someone you know break that loop. And I want to say this right up front. I'm not going to insult you with simplistic advice. Just stop, pray harder, have more faith, just have willpower. People say this to people with pornography addiction all the time. Why can't you just stop? If you could have white knuckled your way out of this, you would have done it already. You can either go cold turkey or you can't. For many people, pornography has become a regulation strategy, especially in the presence of loneliness, stress, anxiety, shame, or a sense of being overwhelmed. And you do not remove a regulation strategy without replacing it with something that works. It's either that or you go so deep into the problem that you figure out the underlying root cause. So, my goal today is to help you understand your pattern, identify what the urge is actually trying to solve, and then build a practical pathway that replaces escape with skill, isolation with connection, and shame with honesty and repair. So let's start with what this usually looks like. Not as a diagram, but as a story your nervous system has learned to repeat. Something hits. It might be loneliness, it might be stress, it might be rejection, it might be conflict, it could be a number of things. My clients have had so many triggers over the years. It might even be boredom, shame. It might be a quiet moment at night when you're alone with your thoughts and you don't want to feel what you know is coming. And then there's that internal moment. Sometimes you barely notice it where a thought shows up that gives you permission. It sounds like, I just need something. I can't handle this right now. Just once. I deserve a break. I have already had a terrible day. What does it matter at this point? And then the behavior starts. For some people, it's not even explicit content at first. It's scrolling. It's a picture. It's an ad that triggers something. It's tab hopping. It's testing boundaries. It's looking for the thing that will shift your internal state without thinking you're going to go too far. And then it becomes the full pattern, watching self-stimulating, edging, whatever it is for you. You find it and you get triggered. And then comes that part that makes this so powerful. It's the reward, the internal shift. It's a relief, a shut off switch, a numbing, a running from the pain. Emotional disassociation is often what it's called. And sometimes it's not even pleasurable. Sometimes it's just the feeling of finally, I'm not in that emotional space anymore. But then for many people, the after effect comes. You feel regret, shame, guilt, anxiety. You feel sadness, that hollow feeling inside, that feeling of what's wrong with me? I just did this again and convinced myself that this is okay when I know full well it's a bad thing. And what does shame tend to do? It makes you hide, it makes you withdraw, it makes you isolate. Isolation increases loneliness. Loneliness increases distress, and distress becomes that trigger again. Ooh, around and around and around and around. So the loop becomes distress, porn, relief, shame, isolation, more distress, porn, relief, shame, isolation, more distress, porn. You get the idea. Now, I want to define something carefully because problematic gets thrown around like an insult, and I don't want to use it that way. When clinicians talk about problematic pornography use, we are usually talking about patterns that involve some combination of distress, impairment, loss of control, escalation, and relational harm, and really harm that this does to your brain and what you believe about yourself. So, if you're trying to figure out whether this is crossing a line in your life, do not ask only how often do I do it, which is often the first questions therapists will ask their clients, how many times a week, and then they'll make a goal together about we're going to cut down from 7 times to 2 times, as if that really makes a difference in their internal. We should be asking things like, do I feel out of control? Meaning, I keep doing it even when I don't want to do it. Do I experience distress? That means shame, anxiety, depression, self hate attached to it. Is it impairing my life? Is it affecting my sleep, time, focus, my motivation, ability to be present at work and at home? Is it harming my relationships, creating secrecy, distance, conflict, loss of trust, reduced in intimacy, especially with a spouse? And is it escalating? Because escalation is a big one. Is it moving from simple pornography to darker and darker things? You think about guys like Jeffrey Epstein who've been convicted of these things. They probably didn't start with human trafficking, especially of children. They started with something a whole lot simpler. A lot of people notice that what used to work does not work the same way anymore. So they need more time, more novelty, more intensity to get to the same internal shift, to get that arousal, to get that heightened feeling. That's not because you're a monster. It's a sign that the nervous system is building up tolerance to the old dose. You hear about this with people who smoke marijuana or other kinds of drugs. A little bit works well at first. And then they need more, and they need more, and they need more till they're broke and have no teeth. Not specific to marijuana on that one, but you get the idea of what I'm saying. And that is what matters. The longer the porn functions as your emotional regulator, the more likely it is to become the default response instead of the deliberate choice. And the more and more intense it has to become, and the more and more unusual in some cases it has to become. If pornography has become a medicine, if you will, what symptoms are you medicating? Because if you treat this only as a behavior problem, which is what we often do in the counseling and psychology field, you will fight behavior with willpower. And willpower is unreliable under stress and loneliness. But if you treat this as an emotional regulation problem, you start building skills. And skills are reliable, relatable, and trainable. You also can change convictions internally, which is a really big thing for change. So I want you to start asking not why am I like this, but what emotion shows up right before the urge? What am I trying not to feel? What story is my brain telling me at that moment? How am I trying to convince myself of this and why? What does porn promise to give me? And what does it cost me afterward? A lot of people are shocked when they answer honestly because the answer is not always, I needed stimulation. The answer is often, I felt lonely, I felt rejected, I felt overwhelmed, I felt ashamed, I felt like a failure, I felt anxious, I felt bored and empty, I felt unseen, I felt powerless, I felt like I couldn't handle being in my own skin. That's a common one. Porn becomes relief from those things. And again, this does not excuse the behavior, but it explains the behavior. And explanation is the beginning of change. Now, I'm going to walk you through a pathway that I would use with someone in counseling, not as a perfect formula, but as a repeatable process you can practice. Think of it like this. There are three things we are trying to do at the same time. We are trying to interrupt an automatic pattern, that snap in the brain. We are trying to regulate the internal state underneath it, what is really going on inside. And we are trying to move toward connection instead of isolation. That is, interrupt, regulate, and connect. Interrupt, regulate, and connect. So, step one. When the urge shows up, the first skill is not fighting it. The first skill is noticing it and naming it. I have an urge. Just say it out loud. I have an urge. That sounds simple, but it's powerful because when you name it, you separate yourself from it. You stop being the urge, you become the person noticing the urge. And this matters because urges are not commands, they are signals. Step two, then, most people try to make a moral decision while their nervous system is on fire, and it does not work. We talk about this in parenting all the time. When your kid's dysregulated, you can't give them consequences. You can't expect them to think logically. You have to help them slow down, calm down, and regulate. So we downshift first in this case. That could be as simple as slowing your breath, longer exhale and inhale, or moving your body, walking, push-ups, and stretching. I found with a lot of my clients, running was a really big thing to change that internal state in a healthy way. Not everybody likes to run. Or changing your temperature. That is the cold water splash, cold shower, right? If you have an ice bath, which is really popular these days, it's a thing that can work. You are not doing this because it's magic. You are doing this because it will lower your arousal. It'll increase your choice. Then step three, Now that you have slowed down a bit, ask what is underneath this. Where do you feel it in your body? And what is it? Loneliness, anxiety, shame, anger, stress, sadness, boredom, rejection. The list could go on forever. If you can name it, you can work with it. If you can't name it, you'll numb it. This is one of the main reasons pornography becomes a default, because people do not have emotional language, or they were not taught that emotions are manageable. So the moment an emotion rises, they treat it like an emergency. This is one of the main reasons pornography becomes a default. People do not have emotional language, or they were not taught that emotions are manageable. So the moment an emotion rises, they treat it like an emergency. But it's not an emergency, it's your body giving you information. You see this with little kids all the time. They don't realize that their bodies are telling them something, and they freak out, they panic, they scream, they cry, they holler, they kick. They do all those things because they don't have the capacity or the ability to manage emotions properly. So, step 4, this part is maturity. This is emotional adulthood. So to say, this is uncomfortable, but it is not dangerous. This feeling can be here, and I can choose what I do with it. Acceptance is not agreement. Acceptance is presence. And the reason this matters is because the more you try to suppress emotion, the more it pushes. Suppression increases pressure. Presence lowers pressure. Step 5. Here's what I want you to understand. Porn is fast regulation. So you need fast regulation alternatives. And you also need to slow regulation practices that make you stronger over time. If you only do slow, long-term practices, you will still be vulnerable at the moment. You need both. In the moment, pick something that changes the state. Movement, cold water, breathing, going outside, grounding your senses, stepping into a public room, walking around in the grass barefoot, calling a friend. Anything that makes the urge harder to act on and easier to outlast. And then later, when the wave has passed, you build slow regulation. Things like sleep, exercise, nutrition, time with your spouse, spiritual disciplines, therapy work, journaling, and building a real community. This is why I say it's not just stop the porn, it's build a life where porn is not your regulator. Now, let us address what I think is one of the most important pieces, that is loneliness. Loneliness is not solved by willpower. Loneliness is solved by consistent connection. And we all saw this during COVID. We got lonely, we got lonely, we got lonely, we got lonely, and all these other things that came with it. And porn is especially seductive in loneliness because it mimics intimacy without risk. It gives a feeling of closeness without vulnerability. It gives stimulation without being known. It gives relief without repair. But loneliness does not get healed by stimulation. It gets healed by attachment, by being known, by being safe, by being in connection. So, if loneliness is part of your trigger pattern, then recovery has to include connection steps. Not someday, not when you feel ready, as fast as you can. And I want to say this gently. You do not need to tell your whole story to everyone. I'm here because I'm addicted to pornography and I'm lonely all the time. Will you be my friend? That's not what we want you to have to say. You do not have to broadcast your struggle, but you do need at least one safe person, only one, because shame grows in secrecy and healing grows in the light. It's a pretty common saying. Now, let us talk about shame, because shame is often the fuel source of relapse. Guilt says, I did something I regret. Shame says, I am something wrong. Guilt can lead to repair, and shame can lead to hiding. Any hiding leads to isolation, and isolation leads to loneliness, and loneliness triggers are the urge. So shame is not just a consequence, it becomes the next trigger, and that's why people feel trapped. And this is where the spiritual layers matter too. Many people have shame because they believe pornography is wrong. So now they are not just stuck in a behavior loop, they are stuck in a moral injury loop. They feel like they are failing God, failing their spouse, failing themselves, and the self-hate becomes unbearable. So what do? They escape from the shame using the shame behavior that created the shame in the first place. It's a whole nother loop. That's why this is not just try harder. Shame does not motivate lasting change. Shame motivates hiding. What motivates change is hope, honesty, and skill. Now, some people say this is not a problem for me. Clinically, it might be true. Some people do not report distress and impairment. It doesn't mean they're honest about it. But remember what we said in part one. Not everyone meets criteria for problematic use, but that does not mean that pornography is neutral. Repeated behaviors can shape the brain's learning patterns, especially when those behaviors reliably change your internal state. Some neuroimaging studies report associations between pornography consumption and measures related to the frontostriatal reward network. And research on compulsive sexual behavior shows cue reactivity patterns and reward salience systems. And then there's relational and ethical impact. Researchers found associations between pornography use, especially interest in degrading content, and greater sexual objectification of women. A meta-analytic evidence links pornography consumption to attitudes supportive of violence against women in non-experimental studies. So clinically, not everyone meets criteria for problematic use, but ethically and relationally, I do not treat pornography as value neutral. It is not. It leads to other things. Now, I want to try to get extremely practical. Most people try to fight this at 1 a.m., 1 in the morning. That's the worst time to rely on willpower. You win this at 1 p.m., 1 in the afternoon. You design your environment so you are not improvising under stress. If nighttime is your vulnerable time, your phone does not belong in your bed, doesn't belong in your room. Put it in another room, charge it somewhere else, put it on a different floor of the house, create friction, make it so you can't immediately get to it. If being alone is your vulnerable time, you do not hope you will do better. You schedule connection. If conflict is your vulnerable time, you build an after conflict routine. Walk, run, breathe, journal, text your safe person, pray, something that regulates you instead of sending you into escape. And if you slip, because many people do all the time, I mean, the clients that I've worked with over the years have had months of slip until they start to do better. Do not let shame turn a slip into a spiral. A lapse is data. A relapse is giving up the plan. So if you slip, you repair quickly. Name what happened, identify the trigger, adjust a plan, reconnect with a safe person, and take one concrete step towards health within 24 hours. The most important moment is after. That is where the shame tries to make it permanent. So let me pull this all together. If pornography has become your regulator, this is not just a behavioral problem. It is a skill problem, a connection problem, and often a shame problem. And really, it's a belief problem. Avoidance is not regulation. Relief teaches the brain. Regret fuels shame. Shame fuels hiding. Hiding fuels loneliness. Loneliness triggers the urge. So the way out is not just grit. The way out is building capacity to stay present, regulate distress, repair shame, and move toward real, authentic connection.